Let's do it. Okay.
All right, go ahead.
All right. Welcome, everybody, to the Jim Acosta Show, where it's an embarrassment of riches in terms of guests. Today, we have the star of White Lotus and the political thriller Words of War, Jason Isaacs. Jason, of course, played Timothy Ratliff, the spiraling, pill-popping, and occasionally pantsless dad in season 3 of White Lotus. He was also, of course, Lucius Malfoy in the Harry Potter movies. He's here to talk about Words of War, which is a completely different project. Jason, great to see you. Thanks for coming on.
No, it's a pleasure. And it's I see that sign behind you, as your audience will see, Jim Acosta and a free press. And that's what this film is about. And we're talking on a day, I don't know when people watch this, where it's never more appropriate to talk about that, because an executive order just came from the White House to cancel all funding for public media for an independent free press.
That's right. And I do want to talk to you about it, but since you mentioned it, you're absolutely right. I mean, the arts are under attack here in Washington. The AP is reporting this morning Trump signed an executive order aiming to slash public subsidies to PBS and NPR as he alleged bias in their reporting. The order instructs the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, other federal agencies to, quote, cease federal funding for NPR and PBS. I mean, Jason, you
the only services that are telling the truth to people,
exactly,
free from commercial constraints.
That's right.
Free from
That's right. Well,
free from
we
the
do a
need to
little of
make
that
money.
here, but
right.
But you're absolutely. I mean, you're a Briton. We were just talking about this before we got going. In Great Britain, you have the BBC, you have public broadcasting. It's what's expected by the citizens.
Sure. I mean, look, it's not that the BBC is perfect by any means. There's all kinds of question marks over it and what it does with its money and what its own political biases are. But there's, just not to be too cheesy and get back on the soapbox, but the film is about a remarkable woman, an ordinary woman. She was a human interest journalist who was sent to a war zone to try and pick a couple of human interest stories. Her name's Anna Politkovskaya in Russia in the early 2000s. And she discovered that the country had been lied to. That Putin had lied, actually ended up he started using the same playbook he used in Ukraine years later, pretended they were invading a country that had full of fascists, didn't tell the Russian population what was being done in their name. She discovered mass graves, evidence of mass rape, torture, starvation, all the rest of it. And she started to tell the public because she was working for one of the very few independent free media outlets in Russia. And in the end, she lost her life for it. They poisoned her at first, and she was relentless, no matter that it destroyed her marriage and her relationship with her kids and stuff. And she just could not stop herself bearing witness because it was too important. And I was at the White House Correspondents' Dinner last weekend. I don't know if you were there also. And the president was very notable by his absence. I've been there when President Obama was there, when President Biden were there. And they were very clear when they gave the speeches to the assembled journalists that as much as they hated having their feet held to the flame, as much as they really were, very worried by the people in the room and what they did to them and made discomforted, it was the central pillar of a free democracy in the West that we should have free press and they should have access. Of course, AP that you just mentioned does not have access to the White House anymore.
That's right. No,
and that's one of the measures of a slide from democracy into autocracy is access and the ability to broadcast.
Yeah, I mean, I skipped the Correspondents' Dinner this past weekend. I mean, I had other plans, I'll put it that way, but I was also not happy that the Correspondents' Dinner was happening, in the fashion that it was, because when
you missed something, I have to say. Yeah. Journalism became center stage. The other years that I've been there, what television shows is the comedy speech and the president being funny and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Actually, it meant that powerful, important, independent journalism was what the evening was about, and only that.
Well, that's good.
Very fabulous speech by Eugene Daniels at the end. He said, we don't invite the president here for entertainment. We don't invite him here because we want to bow down to them. We invite him here to see what the First Amendment is all about.
Yeah.
And we are not the enemy of the people, and we are not the enemy of the state. And they are the central, you journalists who get to speak the truth to power and to the rest of us are the central pillar of what keeps us free in the world.
Yeah, well, and the movie is important because it is about the murder of the Russian journalist Anna Politkovskaya. And let's show a clip of that and talk about it.
Okay.
Did you know that the war between Russia and Chechnya is the longest ongoing conflict in the world?
Now, the Kremlin wants the world to believe that Russia is waging a war against terrorists. Its real purpose is a dedicated campaign of genocide.
I'm in a ditch.
I'm a journalist.
Journalist.
The tactics employed by the Kremlin is itself creating a wave of violence that has never been experienced.
Oh my God.
The war's come home.
People are killing each other. You get in the middle and you're dead too.
Chechnya's your baby, while this newspaper is mine.
There is nothing of value apart from the truth. And I do not intend to stop.
Looks incredible, Jason. I mean, and you hit the nail right on the head. I mean, this is a cautionary tale. We were talking about this with Sean Penn and Eric
Swalwell's come out. But Sean
Yeah.
and Eric Swalwell came on board when they saw the film because, Eric championed the bill that didn't pass eventually in Congress for protection of journalists and protection of the press. And Sean has long been a champion of that. And so they came on board. And we're doing Q&As, in fact, all weekend, cinemas in New York and Los Angeles to try and, generate interest.
Yeah, and it shows what happens when the government can crush the press, and that's what took place in Russia. And people think, oh, it's always been this way. I mean, there was that glimpse, that period during Boris Yeltsin where things were opening up. You and I are old enough to remember that. It wasn't a perfect democracy or anything like that, but there was hope for Russia. And then Putin came in and slammed the door shut on it. And it's
not just look. Many journalists get killed in Russia and around the world in the last year, more than ever. They're also put on trial. They're also sued. Carol Cadwalladr in England was sued, not just the Guardian newspaper. She personally had to raise her own war chest to fight that. But there's self-censorship. Certainly commercial organizations, the people who are not fun, NPR and PBS, the people, you saw the people getting rid of their own DEI departments when they weren't under mandate, for instance, for the White House. People are aware of who's in, what the cultural tide is around them, and they don't want to say things to stick out. I was advised, for instance, to clear all my social media accounts. And I know that's what a lot of people are being told who have been in any way outspoken politically previously. And it's that atmosphere of self-censorship and fear which is as dangerous.
Yeah. Isn't there something wrong with that? It's a little scary.
It's a little scary. It's terrifying that things like that should matter. When I work in America all the time, I pay taxes in America, my daughter's American, and, I love this country, many of the things this country stands for and has stood for. But I'm told, you really shouldn't be outspoken at all about politics because you might not get a working visa. Well, I remember this is going back a long time. I remember being in 2003, I think, in a hotel somewhere, and there were a bunch of lobbyists, Washington lobbyists. And they said, are you going back to America or England? I said, I'm going back to England, and I'm quite looking forward to it because, we're about to invade Iraq again. And I feel like I want to be around a healthy debate. I want to hear all sides of everything. They went, I don't agree. And I went, sorry, what do you mean? And they said, and this was two very smart young women who are political lobbyists in Washington. During the war, I just think you should absolutely support your side and support the troops. And I went, during a war is the time when it's most important to discuss what you're doing, why your young men and some women are being killed and putting their lives on, and why they're killing other people, often in larger numbers. That's the very time they go to completely disagree. Well, that attitude you now see multiplied exponentially, that maybe you shouldn't speak out when there might be personal ramifications for you. And these are difficult times when the fabric of what's kept the world at peace are being pulled apart. It's the very time that everything needs to be examined very closely because there are dire consequences for all of us, for AI and for world peace.
Yeah. And what can artists do in this moment, do you think, Jason? Because we're seeing Trump go after the Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts. They're going after funding for artists, libraries.
Well, the NEH is essentially gone. And I was lobbying in Washington last week for the National Endowment for the Arts. It does extraordinary things, actually, for the things that Republicans really care about. Preserving America's heritage, for treating veterans with PTSD, a whole bunch of community projects they would care about. But this is just a scythe and machete being cut through things. What can we do? Something. The answer is something. Doing nothing just makes you feel bad. If you do nothing and you read all the news all the time, you just feel depressed and scared. If you do something, whether it can be feeding your next door neighbor who nobody visits anymore, or it can be something on a local level, or it can be donating money, or it could just be phoning your representative and saying, I'm upset about this and I will be voting for this next time. Make your local representative aware of the things you care about, but do something. Don't do nothing and talk about it at dinner.
Yeah. And I do want to go back to the Correspondents' Dinner weekend because you were here. And as you said, you're a veteran going to these events in Washington. I hear you ran into the press secretary, Caroline Leavitt. What was that like?
I did, actually, outside the White House. We'd been to the White House to listen. People were very receptive. The staffers we met were very receptive to our arguments about why the arts are important for the entire community, that they're not a politically divisive. It's an apolitical subject. And then I saw somewhere on a newspaper, I had been at the White House Correspondents' breakfast that Tammy Haddad holds every year that everybody goes to from across, right across the aisle. And I'd made a joke about White Lotus. So I was presenting and honoring these extraordinary firefighters who had, after the terrible aviation crash there. And I said, sometimes I get to play heroes, selfless heroes like these men here. And sometimes I get to play privileged, elitist, rich scumbags like nobody here today, obviously. Some very irresponsible journalist. Yeah, you got to laugh. I'm always looking for the cheap gag. Some terrible journalist somehow conflated that with, in the evening, me on the red carpet saying, I was here when Obama was here and here when Biden was here, Trump's not here, saying that I had called President Trump a scumbag. I didn't. I didn't do that because he's president of America and I wish him the best. I don't like the things he does very often, but he is the most powerful man in the free world. And I hope he does things for the benefit of all America and all the world. And it's rotten journalist because it actually has dire consequences for me, possibly professionally, possibly personally. Someone will think that, and people get very physical about these things. Journalists have a responsibility not to make up stuff, because I've been in the White Lotus in the last 2 months. I've done 1 billion interviews, and sometimes I said dumb things or try to be funny, and in print it doesn't look that funny. But a couple of times, mornings, I woke up and I would read an interview that was completely fictitious. Yeah. Like literally not someone I met, with things I have never and would never say. And people get killed for shit like that. So
I hear you.
It's been
we're
shocking
not doing that here. This is
no, you're not. But I'm saying I did meet the White House.
Thing.
I did meet the White House press secretary. I had called Sean Spicer Goebbels previously. I didn't call her that to her face. But I'm trying to be civil to
Lady
everybody
Goebbels.
The worst thing you can do is shut down debate and shut down discussion. Just shout someone down, as I see happen often around the issue of the Middle East, for instance. And the most important thing we have in a democracy is the ability to discuss things, because you don't get that in other countries. Look what happened to Anna Politkovskaya.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And since you brought up White Lotus, I mean, I can't, not talk about this, the Thai elephant in the room, perhaps we'll put it that way. But
nice.
See, I got a cheap laugh too. There you go. We're old enough to tell the dad jokes, and we can just go back and forth. But first of all, you're a Brit, but you play a guy from Duke, as Parker Posey would say.
From Durham, North Carolina. He's actually very, very specifically from Durham. Yeah.
How did you pull that off? I mean, and also the
I love an
popping
accent
of the lorazepam and the lorazepam.
Well, how do I pop the lorazepam off? I was a drug addict for a long time. That was easy. The truth is that I love an accent. I've had lots of different accents in my life. One of the reasons I'm an actor, I'm sure, just to play my own therapist and pop psychologist, is that when I was younger, I really wasn't sure who to be or how to be. I'm not sure I am now. And I would change who I was in every group, what they call code switching now. So I've had a bunch of different accents in my life, and I love it. So it's my way into a character. So Durham is a very interesting place. The blue-blooded Americans who can trace themselves back to the Mayflower there, they have a couple of vowel sounds that are hangovers from the colonial days. So they have a dip on the O sound. People are making fun of Parker all the time, going, Piper, no, that O sound is very English. And then the other sound is the O sound. So Americans say God. Americans say God, not God. And the certain type of people in Durham who want to sound like their grandfather, they say God, not, which is very English. And so when I was doing it, there were a bunch of people online going, this guy doesn't sound American at all. Sounds English or Australian. And it was frustrating because people from Durham were finding me all the time in person and online going, oh my God, you sound exactly like my dad.
Well, and there are all these Instagram videos.
Yeah,
there are all these Instagram videos. I'm sure you've seen some of them where they'll hand somebody, grandmother lines from White Lotus to see if they sound like Parker Posey or like you.
Nobody sounds like Parker Posey, to be fair. You'd have to get on one of Jeff Bezos's, Jupiter shots to find that. But she created a grotesquely brilliant comic persona, and you'll be hard pressed to find anybody who spoke like that, I think.
But apparently, the folks at Duke, if I can bring this out, kill me if I should.
Furious! No, they're furious at me.
They're so pissed at you. What happened?
Yeah. We were trying to work out what he would wear to bed. And I didn't want to wear pajamas. That's a bit corny. And I thought, well, I know a lot of people who still, decades afterwards, wear all their college stuff. And in fact, with the Ratliffs, I'm pretty sure there'd be a Ratliff library and a Ratliff wing at Duke. And, he'd have given money and stuff. And so I said, let's wear a Duke t-shirt. They got clearance. Of course they got clearance. You don't do stuff on TV without clearance. Yeah. And then when I was killing myself and killing my family, some person at Duke who wanted to see their name on the internet, whatever, went, we're really upset about the implication that, it's very irresponsible suicide. I want to go, dude, look at your alumni. There are some real life notorious people wearing Duke t-shirts. You should worry about that for you.
Stephen Miller went to Duke.
Well, I wasn't going to name him because I don't want to wake up and find him at my front door or any of his thugs. But yeah, him and others too. There are bigger things to worry about than a fictitious TV show. But I did, on the other hand, I was stuck at Charlotte Airport, and the only stuff that was available because my bags didn't come through was Duke merch. I bought one with the devils on it, that and I wore it, and then I got in trouble for that. Now people are giving me Duke t-shirts, and I'm going to wear it whenever I see a camera.
Good. Well, and it's a very Duke University thing to do, to go after you for wearing a Duke t-shirt. I mean, I just have to say.
I think I'm being blamed for them losing the game. That's what it is, and it's really not my fault. I wasn't there. I was busy at the finale premiere.
Cooper flag on line one. No,
but I think there goes my honorary degree from Duke that I was hoping for.
You'll have to hope for Chapel Hill.
Yeah.
But in the but White Lotus. I mean, you've done so many great roles over the years. I mean, including in Words of War, which looks terrific. But I mean, are you a little surprised that this blew up the way it did? The White Lotus.
The scale of it was shocking to me. My lovely kids in the show, Patrick, Sam, and Sarah Catherine, allowed me to patronize them or bring my Yoda-like wisdom to the table, whatever, around various different areas about being an actor, particularly slightly Buddhist and tie this, but about enjoying the moment and there never being a destination. It was all journey, and not to be thinking about what this might do for their career or not. No, maybe no one was going to watch it. And maybe it was going to come out the day after some terrible natural disaster or terrorist act, or who knew? So just to enjoy the fact we were in Thailand and we're making this extraordinary thing with these people that we like so much. But then it did actually blow up enormously. And I'm suddenly lost for words because I never seen anything like it. I'm in the Harry Potter films. They obviously were a global phenomenon, but I still had never seen anything like the kind of blue touch paper and spread like this the way.
And some of this is the social media, the way it spreads via social media, because Harry Potter had some of that, but I think just all the videos of you and Parker and the others on the cast.
It is, Jim, but I don't know. I mean, people were having watch parties. And people were actually talking about it at a water cooler. That notional thing. I studied law originally, and you would talk all the time about what does a reasonable man think. And they talked about the man on the Clapham omnibus. That was thought to be the average person. That's what judges referred to. Well, we talk about water cooler conversations, but they haven't really happened for decades. Not since Dynasty or Dallas or whatever. This was a water that genuinely people would gather and talk about it in offices. They would gather and one of the parts of the many areas of brilliance that Mike White doesn't get attention for. One is his directing. People talk about his writing all the time, but he creates an atmosphere of play and improvisation and madness, frankly, and anarchy that allows these things to be so human. But the other thing is that he knows how to write weekly television show. Now, you can binge it on Max. It's still great. But a week in between, like Dickens, who was serialized, allowed it time to marinate and percolate, to be able to be frustrated, and all these nuts theories to come out all over the internet that people had, the monkeys did it, whatever. And then bizarrely, recently, people are desperately want to pick apart the actual relationships between the actors as if they're in any way as interesting as the world that Mike created. We're just a bunch of boring gits. Who cares what we did on holiday,
No, and the Dallas analogy is so good because Who Shot JR? I mean, that was a phenomenon back in the day. And the brilliant thing about White Lotus is you're waiting until the end of the season. Who dies?
Who dies?
Who's the floating body in the?
I mean, that's a brilliant red herring because the truth is, it's not a who done it, or it's not a why done it, or who got it done to them. Really, that's just a fabulous conduit for Mike to use his extraordinary powers as a kind of social satirist,
social comment,
an excavator of the human condition. This series was very different to previous series. I think he's expanded his reach, his ambition as an artist. It was really, he dove into existential issues. I mean, yes, it's rich people who are coming to rent spiritual growth in many instances. But my character, he's not interested at all in anything spiritual or enlightened. He's slumming it by staying in this hotel. They normally rent a mansion on an island. But
you're spiraling. I said spiraling at the beginning.
Delivers to him the greatest spiritual journey that anybody's ever had in the season of White Lotus. And
there's so many guys in our age group who can totally relate to this dad, where things just are falling apart and coming apart, and you can't put it back together.
Well, hopefully there's not that many people who have the utter calamitous catastrophe of being completely wiped out and thinking of murdering their entire family. But you're right. We see ourselves through the prism of someone experiencing the same thing writ large. I think that's true.
Yeah. Jason, I have to ask you just to get serious again, because you mentioned you're a Brit, but you have a lot of affection for America and ties to America.
And many of the principles this country was set up for, and many of the checks and balances built into the Constitution and the government that are currently being dismantled as we speak. Yeah.
And I know you've been advised, be careful about what you say and what you post and so on. But it sounds like I know. too late. But you are concerned, and I hear this from a lot of folks that I talk to overseas. They are very concerned about what's happening here. They see us as
first
the
of
big
all,
brother.
when
the
I
friend.
speak out about it, sorry to interrupt. So when I speak out about it, when I've previously spoken out about it, I used to post much more politically. I don't bother now. I've been persuaded that the social media is just for revolting solipsistic narcissism. So I'm posting interviews with me and stuff. But when I speak out about it, when I think about it, first of all, there is a tide of people who go, shut up. What's it got to do with you? You're not American. Well, what America does and what America has done for 75 years is keep world peace and do a lot of phenomenal good in the world. It's done a lot of terrible things also. Every country has. But, these institutions, flawed as they are, NATO, the United Nations, and I have many criticisms of both of those things, have kept world peace. There's enough nuclear weapons around to destroy the world 1 billion times over. AI is a much bigger threat. If those people who don't know about it don't bother looking into it, it will scare and depress you. But those people who are at the heart of it, I've had conversations with them, the founders of DeepMind and Google Brain and other things. The unguardrailed version of what they are releasing could unquestionably destroy the world as we know it. And they are responsible institutions, or trying to be responsible. And we don't know what Iran and China and other non-governmental actors can do and what they're building. And so we need unity and we need leadership more than we've ever needed it before, for our own future, for our children's future. So that's as being an outsider. Being an insider, as someone who works here and loves what this country has stood for and shown the world also, it's a horrifying thing to see how divided it is and how those central planks of what kept this country balanced, those checks and balances, are just being dismantled. Someone has come in with a sledgehammer and gone, fine, it's always been done this way. But it's a bit like money. Money is not a real thing. Money is a belief system. And so it says on it, I promise to pay the bearer, that it only works when we all buy into it. Same with Bitcoin, only works when you all buy into it. And democracy only works when you all buy into it. When someone comes in and doesn't buy into it and destroys it, like with a bulldozer, we have no idea what's coming. And what's happened in the last 100 odd days has been shocking to everybody on all sides. It's shocking to many, many Republican friends of mine and Republican representatives I was able to talk to this last weekend. And they are not speaking out. And they're not speaking out because they're fearful of being primaried out of their job.
But they express concerns privately.
Many people, and their staff did too, but they'll be primaried out of position. This is an administration full of loyalists, and if you're not a loyalist and don't pretend to be, you will no longer be inside the tent, and this is people's living and livelihood. And so it reminds me a lot of the death of Stalin, which was a broad social satire, but many of the situations I'm seeing paralleled here today, and it's truly terrifying.
And the film Words of War also, I think, it has to be a reminder to people about what we're dealing with the Russians, and that this has been building for many, many years, and what Putin has been doing has been building for many, many years. And this is the sort of the beginning stages of it. This is the preview of
this is his playbook. The playbook he used to tell the Russian people lies about why they needed to invade Chechnya and what the Chechnyans were is identical to the playbook he used in Ukraine. And Anna Politkovskaya, was the first person to tell Russians that, and they listened. They were interested. And one of the other problems in today's world, in America and in Britain, is that we only listen to people who tell us what we want to hear. And that those august institutions that have been around for a century, that will only print when they've got 3 independent sources of corroboration, the faith in them has been so terribly undermined, not just by this White House, but by other autocrats and right-leaning individuals and left-leaning individuals around the world, that the people doing the great work, that telling the truth to the people, putting their lives on the line and certainly their livelihoods here, are not even being listened to or believed. And it's an extremely worrying is a horrible euphemistic understatement. It's a terrifying situation to be in.
No, and I talk about this and the importance of the free press all the time on this show, and you kind of come across as self-righteous and on a soapbox and so on. But I mean, if you're
not on the ground in Europe, Jim. Let me tell you, I was watching one of our institutional shows, Newsnight. It's a show that's on every night on 10:30 weekdays on the BBC, and they have serious journalists on it. And unlike in this country, government ministers and the Prime Minister will always submit themselves to questions from quite aggressive journalists often.
They should.
And just a month or two ago, there was the ex-head of MI6, our foreign service, the equivalent of your CIA, talking very seriously on a mainstream news program, not some fringe place, about how Europe needs to get their army together because we could defeat Russia in a ground war, but we need to have a single leader. And I was thinking, am I really watching a show on nightly news about how we might be in a ground war with Russia. Where did that come from? Well, it came from President Trump having parroted President Putin's talking points about why he invaded Ukraine just the day before, and Europe realizing they were being abandoned, and NATO was being abandoned. And the thing that had held the world at peace was possibly being abandoned, and we had to think for ourselves. Not just, hey, we have a discussion about budget and you need to spend. No, that possibly the world order was being ripped up without any sense for what would replace it.
Yeah, and that's why, I mean, I personally am a little suspicious of this peace process, because how do you have a real peace process if Zelensky does not have a full seat at the table? He has been having discussions with Trump, and apparently they have this minerals deal and so on. But J.D. Vance apparently was out today in an interview with CNBC saying, well, the war is going to be going on for a long time. It's not going to be ending anytime soon. And, you just get the sense, at just about every turn that, it's advantage Putin when it comes to how the Trump White House is dealing with this.
It's as if he's writing the White House's press releases almost every day. And then that grotesque scene where Vance and Trump bullied Zelensky like they were playground bullies. He's not wearing a suit. His country's at war. He's a symbol of his country. Who cares if he's wearing a tie? People are getting slaughtered. There are graves. There are, torture. There's all kinds of things that no one in the West can imagine happening to them, but it happens. And it's happening with irresponsible words.
Yeah, well, one of the brilliant things about social media is that after that happened, after that shameful exchange occurred, there were all these pictures of Prime Minister Churchill, at the White House with FDR not wearing a suit. So come on, give me a break, guys.
But it was a planned ambush. It's a very scary time. But there are still in this country many noble people, many Republicans. It's a party that has stood for and done great things in the past, and it's time to speak up. It's not time to hide.
Yeah. Well, Jason, I really appreciate your time. I mean, the film is brilliant. You're brilliant as always. And it's just a treat to get to sit down with you and talk to you about all of this, because, I'm glad that you were able to share so much of what your thinking is behind all of these subjects, because Americans need to hear this. They need to hear from the outside world. It just can't be voices screaming at each other.
Well, I'm an outsider and I'm an insider. I have an American daughter, and most of my work has been here. I pay my taxes here, so I have the right to a voice. When people say, shut up, you're an actor, I want to go, there's a reality star in the Oval Office, so actors are allowed to speak out.
And as we know, reality TV is not reality. So there's that as well.
That's for sure.
And he's a bit detached from it. But Jason, great to talk to you. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Best of luck with the movie. Words of War with Jason Isaacs. Thanks so much, Jason.